All right, we're broadcasting, if I'm right. Let's see. Live, we're live. Good. Okay, so I'm in the zone. Let me get down. Let me downsize this. I'll leave up the chat if anybody chooses to join me. I hope they do, but you know what happens. Let's not worry about that. Okay, so here's what we're discussing today. Let me use a different picture than that. Let me just use my thumbnail. Where's my thumbnail? Thumbnail. There we are. And in effect, astro-tourism, or this is the year of astro-tourism. I didn't know that, honestly. I just did a Google search today to find a nice thumbnail, and here's one, a picture of people camped out watching the Northern Lights somewhere, who knows where. It's a National Geographic photograph. But, hold on, I gotta do something here. I gotta get rid of the sound in my ear. Nub. Let me do this like that. Okay, so, and I just want to talk about this briefly. Not so much the astro-tourism aspect of it, but rather the implications of the economy around an observatory. So, you know, when you think of astronomy and you think of money, people making money, this is the first thing that people think about is astro-tourism. All right? And that's not an unreasonable guess. I mean, there certainly is. There are people, but we have to be very careful how we think about this, right? So I'll give you a good example. I know when I was working in South Africa, and they built the SALT telescope, which is an 11 meter optical telescope, Hobby Ebele or something like that. Can't remember. That's the design of the thing. I can't remember. Anyways, I didn't use it. I've never visited it. I have no idea. Although I've been to Sutherland a couple of times, I just never visited the actual telescope site for that facility. Anyways, let me be clear. Sutherland is the nearest town. And along the way, when they put that in place, because it became the largest optical single dish, single mirror in the Southern Hemisphere, or I think that's how they ran with it at the time, and I don't know if it is still. But when it becomes number one, people want to visit. Okay? Now, Capetown is, I think, 4 or 5 hour drive away or something like that. Maybe it's 6. But the point is, it's close enough to Capetown that people would be very happy to drive out there on a long weekend and park off in a bed and breakfast and then go up and visit the observatory and then get a night viewing. Okay? And people have done this. And in fact, I'm told that something like a couple 100,000 people a year actually go to Sutherland. And Sutherland itself has, per capita, the most number of bed and breakfasts and cafes in comparison to Capetown itself. And Capetown, I'm not a big fan of the city. It's a to me it's pretty. It's an attractive city, but it's basically an overgrown fishing village to me. I really spent very little time there. In fact, I would get in, have to do something, and get the hell out. Mostly because I had a couple bad experiences there, and I just learned to dislike it. And there's an attitude in Capetown. It's like a form of xenophobia. And I'm not talking towards people from outside South Africa. I'm talking about people from outside Capetown. Because I had friends that moved to Capetown and would tell me stories like, well, it took me 10 years to be accepted into the community, the local community. Well, anyways, and so that's my unbiased, that's my biased view of the world. So don't take my word, please. If you get a chance to go to South Africa and Capetown, it's well worth the visit. You'll enjoy yourself. There's plenty of good people there. And even myself, I found that I've had lots of people I can have interesting conversations with when I go there. So this is sort of a 1991 bias that I developed when I first arrived. I literally got flown in to Capetown 2 weeks after landing in South Africa to give a presentation at the local South African astronomy conference. And my first impression, the first day I got there, was not being served at a restaurant. They just didn't serve you. They just walked by you and kept walking by you. I was pissed. and eventually they served me. And then it just went downhill from there, honestly. And then some of the things I heard and that, like there was back in the day, anyways. But I will go past that. I'll let that go. My point is, this little town has actually had a boom as a result of astro-tourism. They're making money. They're doing okay because of the SALT telescope. And so there's a winning formula. And what is it? Well, be relatively close to a rather large populace with people that might have an interest in something like this. So in Capetown, you go to you go on the wine route and all these things like that, and then you might wind up in Sutherland, where you will, be able to park off, have a coffee, do a sundowner, and then go visit an observatory, which is one of the largest in the world. So that's a winning combination. So for astro-tourism's sake, that will work. But people will likely not fly around the world to do that. Okay? So the odds of getting somebody from overseas to fly into South Africa, it's a long journey. Like if you're coming from Canada, for me it would be, I would probably have to fly to Toronto, from Toronto to Europe, and then down to Johannesburg, and from Johannesburg to Cape Town. So you're talking, it's about a 26 or 27 hour day. It's a full day and a bit just to get to Cape Town, okay? And then you got to get up to Sutherland. So it's another 6 or 7 hour drive the next day or whenever you're going to do it. So it's a real investment in time to do this. If you're coming from, North America. If you're coming from Europe, it's slightly better. You just fly south, 12 hours, okay. But the point is that very few people are going to do that. So when I talk about astro-tourism, I try to remind people that really astro-tourism has to have a draw where people think they're seeing something. So if there's a total solar eclipse directly over the Kruger National Park, as an example, and there was one directly over the South Africa Zimbabwe border in 1999, and I actually drove up there. It was 3 hours drive, and then I chased the clouds until I found an opening, and I was able to watch that eclipse, and I was willing to do that. I was an astro-tourist that day. Okay, my friend and I did it. No one else wanted to come. He and I went up there, and we drove like madmen along a dirt track that tracked along the border between Zimbabwe and South Africa until we found an opening. That is an astro-tourist. That is truly an astro-tourist. So astro-tourism is kind of a measure between adventure tourism and leisure tourism. It's kind of a mixed bag. And when I talk about adventure tourism versus leisure tourism, let me give you an example of what I mean by that. And I'm just going to open up, where is it now? I got not airships, not video. Where is that silly thing? Okay, I'll open this baby up here. Now, this is a presentation I gave a long time ago. We were talking about the idea of doing astronomy on Kilimanjaro and building a cableway. And I'll come back and talk about this in a moment or two. But I want to show you something about leisure versus adventure tourism. So if I get down to all this craziness, this is just work I did for a project in thing. And so here it is. This is a marketing story, okay? So basically what we were trying to do is we're trying to convince the Tanzanian government to look at and encourage them to get actively involved or get them to give us permissions to start looking at the possibilities of doing astronomy on Mount Kilimanjaro. And that process is ongoing, just as a matter of interest. I'm not directly involved in it for various reasons, but I'm directly involved with supporting the Tanzanian group. So I still act as their advisor / consultant on it. And one of the primary interests that we had with Kilimanjaro is that we immediately saw that if we could find ways, we could actually rebrand the mountain of Kilimanjaro from adventure to leisure. So we could rebrand it as a leisure destination. And why would you want to do that? And why would Sutherland be an example of precisely the idea of a mixture between leisure and adventure? Well, here's a great example. If you compare snorkeling to scuba diving, or just suntanning to snorkeling even, the number of people who will go snorkeling in the world is about 20 million. 20 million people. So that's a fairly large community of people that you can make money from. You sell a snorkel to them. You might sell fins to them. You could sell bathing suits or whatever, gloves or a trip. You could sell a trip, which includes snorkeling, right? You got 20 million people willing to do that, okay? As opposed to 6 million that will likely go scuba diving. So they're the exact same sport, except one, you're in very shallow reefs, you're just under the water, and you just have a bunch of goggles and you know what I mean? So versus something else where you have to be trained. So snorkeling, it involves very little training. Scuba diving involves a great deal of training if you want to start going down to significant depths, etc. So there's a substantial difference in the number of people. In fact, it's over 3 to 1, as you can see here. And the difference will be a little bit different. Even in terms of the amount of money they will spend will be different. Yes, it's more expensive to be a scuba diver. Okay, so it's going to require you're going to have to rent a boat, you're going to have a guide, all those kinds of things, which adds value. But what you might find, and this is the interesting part, is that people who scuba dive are adventurous. And they tend to live rough everywhere else. So of these 6 million people, most of them are not going to be willing to pay for 5-star hotels. And they're not going to have the money to do it probably. So you're going to get people in this category that will likely pay a significant amount less, a significantly smaller amount of money than you would if you were catering to the 20 million that did snorkeling. Now, anybody that's been to reefs and shoals, you're probably going to give this a try. Anywhere you go you're on the ocean, you'll give this a try. And most of us have done it as kids, I'm pretty sure, at least here in Canada, at the beaches in southwestern Ontario where I grew up, on Lake Huron. So this was common. I know as a kid I did this, right? But I never ever did this. I never did scuba diving. So the difference between leisure and adventure is really economical in the economic sense, is substantial. It's around 10 to 1 actually. So that's kind of the number that's kind of ballpark numbers you're talking about here. So when I talk about Sutherland, the town of Sutherland, and I'm sure most people don't have any idea where Sutherland is. So let's see if I can find, let's see if I can find Google. Where's my Google Earth map? Where's Google Earth? You have to look around for these things here. I've got it here somewhere. Let's check again back there again. Yeah, sorry, I was right by it. Let's go look at Google Earth for a second, okay? So, and of course, there it is. Here it comes. And so we're going to just go, just close. Don't be a dog licker. Just close. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go Sutherland, South Africa. And I'm going to go search. And you can see here, it's going to take me to the southern tip of Africa, in South Africa. And we're going to zoom down, and this is the small town of Sutherland, okay? If I expand out again, you can kind of I'll center it. I'll give you an idea, okay? So here's Capetown, the peninsula of Capetown, Stellenbosch, all of this stuff. Here's Paarl. This is an area where you have lots of wine vineyards, I keep biting my lip here, vineyards, etc. And you can drive out to Sutherland. And at Sutherland, of course, let's see if we can find the telescope while we're there. South African Astronomical Community Observatory. So let's just zoom in, see if we can see anything exciting. There's the gate. Let's see where we get to the observatory, whatever, it's somewhere on the mountaintop. And here we are. So this is Sutherland. Okay. So this is the observatory. And there's SALT. Okay. South African Large Telescope. Southern Africa Large Telescope. All right. So the little town, it's about, it's about 20 kilometers from Sutherland, as you can see it there. And it's a several hour drive from Capetown. That's where Sutherland is. It's a little tiny town. And yet it is making a fair bit of money. And the reason why I say it's a combination of leisure versus tourism, Because it's a relatively easy drive. And there is no effort that's required. You drive up there, except for the drive, you drive up there, you get yourself a bed and breakfast, you probably already booked one, and then you go on an you just do a nice drive out to the observatory, and you can see here is the starry Kourou observatory. So there's probably spots along the way where they will have night viewing, etc. And then they will take you on, and you will actually be able to look through a little tiny window to see the actual telescope of the Southern African Large Telescope, SALT. But you literally are looking through a tiny window, maybe 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet or something stupid. It's really small. And I mean, having been a person that's given presentations at Hartrail, the radio telescope in South Africa, now the oldest one, the other ones being built are nearby in the Kourou. So if we made this smaller, we could probably find Carnarvon. And it's a couple hours further on. Where the hell is Carnarvon? And that's where they're talking about building Frasenburg. So it's got to be around here somewhere. Anyways, but that's where they're going to build the SKA, and that's where they're building Meerkat. So Meerkat's being built here somewhere. I have to feff around here. I'm not going to bother. I don't really care. So anyways, so the point I'm trying to get at is, so this Sutherland is actually a combination leisure adventure, simply because it really does take an effort to get there. But once you're in Capetown and you want to go for a drive out in the countryside, and you've gone through the vineyards, etc., and you carry on out to the edge of the Kourou, which is a rock desert effectively, you might want to go and park off in a nice, bed and breakfast, and then you may go off and see this observatory. So it's entirely possible that can occur. The numbers are incredibly small of people that do that. It just is. It'll be handfuls of people, really, that will fly in from Europe or somewhere else. They just won't do it unless something's going on over the night sky, like Halley's Comet is visible. Okay, so things like that. Okay, I was eating popcorn. That's what's driving me nuts. Anyways, so that is one of the issues with regards to leisure tourism. If you want to talk about astro-tourism. Okay, where's my picture of astro-tourism again? So if you want to talk about astro-tourism, as these people do here, it's really a misnomer. Yes, it's a niche market. There is a market of people that do this. They in this case, they go to see the northern lights. Okay, so they will go to places up north where it's dry and dark here in Canada, and they can see the northern lights. Or they'll go to Norway or someplace like this, or you'll go on the internet and see it. I mean, I used to see them above my head in Edmonton in the middle of winter when it got very cold and there was solar activity. So, you might do this. And as I said, I drove to the border with Zimbabwe to watch a total eclipse of the sun simply because I was in South Africa at the time. I wouldn't have flown there to do it, but yet other people did. Okay? And they would book tickets, everything, early just to do that. So there are people willing to do that. But would you do it to simply go see a telescope? Would somebody get in a plane and want to fly and see the different observatories around the world? And just to say, I've been to 18 observatories in my lifetime. I've worked in 11 countries, and I've worked at several of them, or a couple of them anyways. And I've helped to design and conceptualize, and now we're building new ones, which I've been involved with, okay? So for me, I like it. I like going to observatories. I like to see how they operate. I like to meet the people, because I get a feel of what it's like to be at the observatory, and I enjoy being at observatories because I've worked at them for so long, okay? So for me, there's a vested interest because it's just something I've done and I have an interest in it. Now, that would probably not be the case for the vast majority of astro tourists. They just simply wouldn't do it. Yes, they'd be happy to go see an observatory if it was nearby, but they wouldn't get on an airplane and fly miles. Like if you fly to Hawaii, you might do it. If you go to Hawaii and if you're on Mauna Kea and stuff like that, yes, I'm sure you would probably drive up to see the observatories. Not least to which you get a beautiful view from the mountaintop. So, it'll be a combination of things. Again, so people may do that. So again, it's got to be geography. There's got to be something attracting other than simply the telescope, unless it is truly the largest in the world and stuff like that. So there are people that actually do go and visit Meerkat because it's right off the N1, The main highway between Capetown and Johannesburg is the N1. And so some people happily will drive 3 hours east to go and see Meerkat and the future home of the SKA. So, because it's a multi-billion-dollar project. But that's South Africans who have pride in their country, and most of them are the ones that are doing that. Okay? So now that we've dispensed with that, and you have an idea what the hell is adventure versus leisure tourism. And when I talk those two terms, I want you to always remember 10 to 1, because that's the economic disparity between the two. So, for example, Mount Kilimanjaro gets 25,000 people a year who successfully climb the mountain. They probably get about 35,000 people in total. And that generates 40 or 50 million dollars. With inflation now, it's probably 50 or 60 million dollars a year in revenue. Okay? And that sounds like a lot of money, and it is to the local economy of Tanzania. Certainly is to the local economy around the mountain of Tanzania, because that's what I'm looking for here. It employs about 10,000 people directly. So porters, guides, cooks, and things like that. All the people that go up the mountain with you. Okay? So I'll give you an example. I'll show you a picture of that. Let's see what we got going here. Let me give you a picture. So here is myself. That's not me. That's our lead guide. And here's myself when I was a little younger. I was 50. Here's my niece, and here's my daughter. So Hannah, Debbie. And this is the team that took us up the mountain, the three of us. Okay, we took one of the whiskey routes. Wasn't exactly easy, but hey, we made it. This thing out of my ear, it's driving me nuts. So this is how many people that adventure tourism employs in Kilimanjaro. Okay, and that's how much it takes because they basically, all of this stuff on the roof, they carried up. All these people carried up. We carried our little backpacks, as you can see on us here. That's what we carried up. Everything else was them doing everything. And these guys are incredibly fit. I thought I was fit. At this time, I was still playing first team rugby at 50. And I thought I was extremely fit. I was training and everything. And these guys would blow past me as if I was standing still. It was really, really amazing. Really. Okay? So yeah, so it takes a lot of people, it employs a lot of people. That's adventure tourism, okay? And it helps incomes. So when you start thinking about astro-tourism on Kilimanjaro, well, you're worried about losing their jobs, not that. These people don't want to lose their jobs. And so anytime you think about astronomy on Kilimanjaro, as I did, and I started this stupid thing off in 2010 when I was at the Department of Science and Technology, and I was giving a presentation to COSTECH members of COSTECH that flew in from Tanzania. They wanted to get involved in the Square Kilometer Array project. And of course, at the time, there was no chance of that occurring. It was really limited to the 9 countries that were already involved, or was it 8? And I actually had kind of thought of maybe we should try to expand it, but that was never an idea that was accepted. And I'm hearing now, as of now, that they're saying they will not build out to any other partner country for many years, and not in the foreseeable future, which I predicted in 2012 when I left the program after we successfully won the bid. I simply predicted it because it's just the nature of financing. It's a lot to do. And also the attitudes in South Africa, they really weren't keen on the partnerships anyways. It's going to sound weird. They've done lots of work into the partner countries, but there were members in the community in South Africa that really didn't worry about the partner countries. They were only interested in building the core of the telescope. Because then the lion's share of the money goes to South Africa, and that's what it wasn't they were even thinking about money for South Africa, quite honestly. They just wanted to focus on South Africa because that's where they're from. And so there's these little bickering that goes on in the astronomical community. Certainly in Southern Africa, some of these things occur, okay? So this was when was this? This was 2012. So after I proposed the idea at COSTECH, at the meeting at COSTECH at the Department of Science and Technology, I was the Director of Human Capital Development, Astronomy, what was I called? What was my directorship called? The Director of Astronomy Frontier or something like this, Radio Astronomy Frontiers, that's what it was. And my job was to do human capital development and also to encourage more assistance from our partner countries in our lobbying strategy. And part of that was giving presentations to members all over Africa, which I love doing. And I got to meet these group of people from COSTECH, and and I said to them, listen, you guys want to be involved in SKA, but you've got the highest freestanding mountain in the world. Why not think of doing astronomy on your own mountain? And they just thought, wow, that's an amazing idea. Could we? And literally, I went home from the meeting, I emailed some friends, and the next day someone offered us a telescope, a millimeter telescope, and another group asked me to come and give a presentation, and then the Europeans asked me to come and give presentations in Europe, and the Russians. And that happened in 24 hours. That literally happened the evening of. I emailed before I left work. The next morning I got responses, and I presented that to them in the second day of meetings. So it was really very quick. And so they went back very excited and hired a guy named Norali Jiwaji. And he and I became very good friends, and we've been working on the project ever since, working on getting permissions and getting the government to consider this. But the most important thing we realized was, and I'm going to focus on Kilimanjaro predominantly, but I want to make other comments on astro-tourism still, okay? I'll come back to that. But as I said, this is a group of people. So once we started talking about telescopes on Kilimanjaro, you got to be careful that you don't affect the economy that already exists on Kilimanjaro. So when I was finally able to give a presentation in 2016 to the Tanzanian government, I was given 3 issues that I had to always consider. And the first one was the environment, of course. It's a protected rainforest and mountain. The aesthetics, I can't affect the beauty of the mountain, and finally economics. And the economics aspect they were referring to was these people's jobs. And these are friends of mine. These are people I still have contact today with, okay? Addo here, for example, and so on. Now just to finish up the story of this particular 2012 climb, myself and Hannah, we made it to the peak. Poor Shelby, she got very sick at about 5,000 meters and had to turn back. Unfortunate. It does happen. She was unlucky that she didn't get to spend an extra day or so at higher altitude in Johannesburg, where she could acclimatize a little bit more before we went on the trip. She probably would have been successful otherwise. Okay? So just to prove, let me give you some proof. So here we are, Addo, Hannah, myself, in 2012. Okay? Now, yeah. And so, of course, that was a long time ago. But I want to show you, here it is again, 10 years later, I'm 60, and you can, I just want to show this picture again, just for those people who have never seen it. This is a picture in 2012, and this is 2022. I got to the same site. There's a couple things in this picture you'll notice pretty quickly. And the first one is, we're well dressed here, heavily dressed here for the weather. Gloves, jacket, pants, boots, whatever. And now you can see me over here, and I'm in my shorts, no shoes, no socks, whatever. Now let me be clear. I did not climb Kilimanjaro dressed like this. So I will take, don't think I'm stupid. It was so hot. Once the sun comes up, it gets very hot. It was very cold at night, and I had on a pair of sweats, and I had just a pullover this time because this was way too much for me. I was sweating my ass off in this outfit. And it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. So I just said I will never do that again. And when I climbed the second time, I climbed with much less clothing. But by the time the sun came up, I started sweating. So I just stripped down quickly for this photograph. And to get in these photographs, there's a lineup of people. Like behind this camera, there's a whole bunch of people waiting to get their photograph taken at this site because they've made it. It proves that they're successful. That's just the way it is. So here I am in 2022. There's other things you can notice. The sign is different. And you might ask, so what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is it tells you something about the weather. Okay? Now, you can see low cloud cover in both images, which is never very good for optical astronomy or millimeter astronomy or things like that. But for radio, it's not a train smash. Anyway, so depending on the science you want to do. But it depends on the time of year, too. But the reason why the signs are different is because the weather, the wind, is pretty nasty at the top. So it's windswept. There's virtually nothing up there growing. And you sort of get a hint of the glacier off to the corner here. But so these signs have to be replaced all the time. Now let's go back to astro-tourism for a second and leisure tourism versus adventure. This was adventure tourism. No doubt about that. Very few people. Again, I was one of 25,000 that was successful both times. Okay? But now today, as I'm speaking, my friends will send me pictures from Wi-Fi from the top of Kilimanjaro. Okay? So they've actually pulled a cable all the way up the mountain. So when people want to talk about, that's a form of, they're improving the comfort of this whole process. So now the communications, when you're on top of Kilimanjaro, when I was there the first time, there was no connectivity. There was no cell coverage, nothing. Okay? So you're you're incommunicado for 7 days. And then this time, when I was at Kibo Huts, which is about 1,000 meters below this site here, and about, I can't remember how many kilometers it is. It takes 9 hours. It takes about 7 hours to get to the peak from Kibo Huts. But it's about 1,200 meters in altitude rise. Anyways, when I was in Kibo Huts in 2022, I was able to use Wi-Fi to chat to people on WhatsApp. Okay? Now, if I go back, which they want me to do, I'm not sure if I will be in December, but I will be able to use Wi-Fi at the peak. Right there, I'll be able to chat to people with my Wi-Fi. Now, what is the significance of that? Well, I can tell you. The greater the amount of connectivity, the greater the value of tourism you're going to get. Because it sells it. Because if people think they can always stay connected, they may think of doing it. So the number of people that want to climb that mountain will increase because of the Wi-Fi systems they've now put in place on top of the mountain. Right to the peak. Right to the peak. Okay? So, let me put this back in my ear. It's annoying, but let me do this. Come on. Okay. Am I still live? No, shit. No, man. Hold on, I gotta make sure I'm still talking here. Okay. So we're still live. We're still live. Let me just make it quieter. Okay. So once you pull Wi-Fi up a mountain like this, you're now fundamentally changing the mountain from complete adventure where you're on your own, you have a couple people, in this case 10 or 12 or 15, taking care of the three of you, and now you've got the whole world you can communicate with. So it changes. It's become easier. And so Kilimanjaro is slowly being rebranded as a leisure tourist destination, whether we want to or not. So when I was talking about leisure tourism in 2016, I mean, they eventually did it themselves. So even without me, they were already doing it, okay? Had nothing to do with me, had everything to do with to try to increasing the tourism. So they're trying to expand all of their camps, and they're building like crazy up there. So, when someone says to you, we got to worry about the environmental impact. Well, the first thing you should think about is if they're building huts, they're affecting the environmental impact. Okay? So, yeah. So, so suddenly the whole idea of leisure tourism on Kilimanjaro is expanding rapidly. And again, you can see off in a little distance here, you can see a little bit of the glacier. Kilimanjaro glacier still there. People had predicted it would have vanished by now. They thought it would vanish by whenever the hell it was, and it's been there and still is. I mean, look, to be clear, I mean, the climate change models aren't perfect, okay? But they keep making amazing predictions simply because it helps them get financing, because people then want to know for sure. And as they get more financing, they get better modeling, whatever, same idea. So anyways, back to our idea of astro-tourism. Now, nobody in their right mind is going to build a telescope at the peak of Kilimanjaro. Nobody. Not a soul. Okay? So let me see if I can find, did I take a picture of where I would want to do it? What do we got here? No, that's not it. Okay, so we were actually referring to a possible site either at the secondary peak or in the saddle itself. Now the saddle is relatively easy. You can literally drive up there. There is a road. Let me describe that again. Not as a road, but rather a trail. There is a trail, and a 4x4 can get up there. And if you have specialized vehicle that has breathing apparatuses, like a Unimog or something like that, so you can modify, you can get up there. But the road itself is, let me just say, adventurous in and of itself. Okay, so even it is adventurous. So I mean, and what I mean by adventurous is that's my euphemism for a little scary in places. Most places okay, but some places a little dicey. Okay, because it gets washed away. Because in the lower climate, in the lower altitudes, you're in rainforest where it rains a lot. Okay, so you get the trails being washed out. So you have big ruts and all sorts of funny things. The higher up you go, the easier it is to drive on, but you have less air. Okay, so no one is talking about building on top of the peak. Not a soul. Okay, now there are two camps. The idea was to build. Do I have any pictures here? Do I have pictures of this? Yes. All right. Let me just do this. Let me just play this. This is the area we're referring to. This is the saddle. Let's just play this. Taking someone down quickly. Moenzi, the saddle. There's my buddy. And off in the distance is Kibo Huts at the base of... He climbed with me. He was a good dude. Uhura. He and I were both successful. There was 4 of us that were successful on this trip. But, I mean, you can see there's no plants. So there's a couple brushes. You can see the little bushes here. But there's very little. This is Arctic alpine. There's certainly clouds, okay? And the cloud cover rises up during the day, and then it goes away. So depending on the time of night, you have clear skies, and it's windy as hell, as you could hear. But we're talking about building a telescope somewhere off this trail, because this is where they hike. You don't want to be that near them. Or we're either going to build directly in Kibo Hut itself, okay? Or very nearby. So there's 2 camps, pardon the pun. There's 2 mindsets. You build where all the environmental impact has already been done, which I believe is the answer. And there are others that say build far away from the economic impact, okay? So if I was to, let me see, do I have a picture? I probably have pictures somewhere, but I have to find the goddamn things. It's just driving me crazy. So you got to look around. You're looking for things. Where's a picture of, I want to find a picture of me at Kibo Hut. Yeah. Oh, is this it? Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So this is a picture of us up at the base. This is base camp height. A bunch of us climbing. Okay. Here's myself and Sabo and a couple other dudes. And in the background you can see the peak of Kilimanjaro, and we had to walk up. But those huts, they're expanding them they're doubling them, the number they have in that, because they want to double the number of people that are climbing. So they want to make accommodations for everybody. The better the accommodations, the more likely people will climb. The limitations they have is power, okay? And to some extent water, but power predominantly, okay? Because so there's no showers. I mean, okay, this place here has a shower. You could take a shower, but we never bothered. But I mean, basically you have, you have some toilets and stuff like that. And most of them, generally speaking, aren't, they're just outhouses, effectively, okay? In some instances. But they're busy upgrading that because they want to rebrand the mountain, less adventure, more leisure. They want to get more people of a variety of ages willing to climb up the mountain, take a leisurely stroll. Even if they just make it to this base and they don't go further, it still generates income for all the locals, for the country of Tanzania. Okay? So, yeah. And again, as I said to you, astro-tourism, people are not going to climb Kilimanjaro to do something unless there's something specific they could see in the night sky there. Because this is a hell of an effort. It's 40 or 50 kilometers you have to hike in the end. It's a lot of work to get even to here, and you got to have some kind of, you got to be acclimatized to high altitude, because this is at 4,000 meters as it is, okay? So, Anyways, so I just wanted to show you what the huts look like. And the point I'm trying to show you about that sort of stuff is that when they're building these things, they're actually slowly rebranding. Okay? So, but when you build stuff like that, you're doing environmental impact. That's the key to the story, right? Remember the three issues: environmental, aesthetic, economic. So obviously building huts is adding economic value. It's increasing the number of jobs, not decreasing. That's a big plus for these guys, okay? It's being done in an area where the environmental impact is minimal. In other words, the area is already being impacted by people's presence. So doubling it is not making too much of a dent to the environmental impact. And finally, aesthetics. There's no difference, because they're building the huts to look similar to the other huts, and you can't see them from the ground, so there's nothing that can be affected by the aesthetics. So in that sense, they're okay. They don't mind, okay? Now, we astronomers, we're going to build a telescope somewhere. So some people think a telescope would be cool if we put it right at Kibo Hut at 4,800 meters. It'd be one of the highest observatories in the world, the second highest, in fact. The highest is in Chile, in Atacama, the Apex telescope. I think it's at 5,100 meters, okay, or 5,050 meters or something like that, okay? It's of that order. I'm not sure exactly. And I'm showing this picture, and I'll talk about it in a moment. But if we were to build at Kibo Huts, we're not doing any environmental impact, okay? Right? But are we affecting the economy? So in other words, if we have a telescope there, will fewer people decide to do the trip because they look at it, they go, oh, man, Jesus, now they got this thing polluting the view. But I mean, I'm of the opinion, you've got huts there. What the hell's the difference? Worst case scenario, we could camouflage the telescope, its view, with the hut or something, or something like that, and do off to the side or whatever else. So you could put it behind some rocks or whatever, And I can assure you, when you get to Kibo Huts, you're not out running around. You're pretty tired. It's a long climb to get there, just so you know. Okay? So anyways, that's just my opinion. It doesn't might be wrong. Now, if I was to put it at the huts, then you have to do astronomy that's not affected by the people that are there. So, and the point about that is that there's not a lot of electricity. So optical astronomy you could do, although when the guys go marching off, they have their little lights on and stuff like that. There is lighting before you leave the camps and stuff like that. So clearly then you'd want to find some darker skies, be further away from people. And likewise with radio, you've got to be careful too that you don't get radio frequency interference. And if they've got Wi-Fi, it means they're using their cell phones and they're still using their WhatsApp. That would be a problem for certain frequencies. So you just be judicious about what you do. And there are some, and our last trip was one of these things looking for something other than radio. So, it wasn't going to be a problem. But does it affect it economically? And that's still an important factor. Okay? So, and then the next argument was, I just mentioned the road. Now, the road won't look like this, but if we were to try to put a telescope up there, we would have to build a road that looks like this. Okay, and all these switchbacks, this is the Sawney Pass in South Africa, and these switchbacks will be hidden by rainforest and that, but the problem is, you have to build a road substantial enough to get equipment up there, because these telescopes can weigh pretty significantly, right? And so that means you got to cut down trees, and that means you have to affect the environment. Now, the plus side about building a road is you give easy access to the plateau. You get easy access to the saddle, which means that if somebody has gotten sick, if somebody has gotten altitude sickness, we can get them down the mountain much quicker than is presently possible. So as it is, people have to be carried on cart. And as I showed you in my video I just played, wherever the heck it was, what the hell was it? Video? Where was that video? I don't know where it was. Where is it? I played a video. I don't know where the hell it is. The hell with it. I don't care. But in that video, I was actually saying that the people coming down the mountain, in fact, had to be brought down in these little basically a glorified wheelbarrow. It was like a gurney cart with a wheel on it, and the people carried them down. Okay? So building a road has positives. And on top of which you build a road, you could also build channel beside it, bring up power, fiber. So instead of running the fiber through the rainforest and affecting the animal life, you could actually run the fiber in a channel that's beside the road and underground, right? Protected, okay? And then secure from not being chewed on by animals, which you have to go and fix all the time, okay? Just stuff like that. So there'd be some big pluses having a road there, and on top of which you'd have access for safety and health and all these kinds of things, and even security for that matter. So building a road has a net economic value to it, but it also has an effect on the aesthetics of the mountain. And that's one of the issues you don't want to do. Now, right now, the idea of building a telescope on Kilimanjaro, the easiest way to do it is to simply build a road. Now, in 2016, we came up with an exotic solution because that's what I do. I look for exotic solutions. Now, before I talk about that exotic solution, well, I won't even talk about, yeah, I will. I'll do this first. So where's my astro-tourism story? I want to show you a video. It's just a short video where, what the heck is it? Where is this one here? Is this it? It's a couple minutes long, but I want to play this video. This is one of the videos I made on how do you make a crazy idea real, okay?
Closing the triangle,
so
a novel method
so
to bring crazy ideas to realization.
You can find this on the internet. You can search for GERAF closing the triangle. You'll find this exact same video. I don't have to play the whole thing. But
once you have come up with an idea,
when you have an idea of something like this and it's technologically based, you have to break it down to its component
make it a reality.
Parts. And then some of these technologies may not yet exist.
The triangle.
So you got to go about, you first have to
crazy
estimate
ideas
how long it'll take to make
unrealized
them,
dreams.
and the total will equal the amount of time it takes to close the triangle.
And make your crazy idea come true, we follow the process I refer to as closing the triangle. In the first instance of closing the triangle, we have to identify the various technologies or component parts of the idea that we have to discover or create. Each technology block we require is a little bit of knowledge, and it takes a little bit of time to create or discover that knowledge.
I'm going to go forward a bit.
And to close.
So here it is here.
And the distance between the two sides from closing represents the amount of time left before our idea is finally realized.
Okay, so that's precisely the idea. So if you have a crazy idea, and some of my ideas really are crazy, and I get told that a lot, okay? I get told, oh my God, you do this, that's ludicrous, how can we do this? Anyways, but this is how you solve it, right? It's okay, it's not simple, let's be clear, because some of these technologies don't yet exist. A perfect example in this video I created was Leonardo da Vinci makes he designs an ornithopter, a flying machine, and it's not until the Wright brothers, so the 1400s to the Wright brothers in 1903 that his idea becomes a reality. Okay, it wasn't an ornithopter they built, but the point was a flying machine. Okay, so you're talking 600 years, or was it 1600s? Whatever, but it's in the video. You'll see it in the video. I can't remember. I forget shit, but the point I'm trying to get at is, it would have been a crazy idea for Leonardo da Vinci when he first came up with it, and people would have laughed at him. They would have shunned him. They would have tried to convince him he's nuts. And then eventually, as the technologies start getting resolved over, in this case, 600 years, or I think it was 1600, so 400 years. 1600. Sorry, the 1600s, and it was over 400 plus years. Then people would start jumping into trying it. And if you see any of these old videos on people trying to fly, you see some of the craziest inventions and contraptions ever conceived. And that's because technologies were being created that might have been able to resolve some of the issues. And eventually, the Wright brothers came up with the right group of technologies solved to realize the dream of flying. Okay, unmanned flight. Okay? And that's how you kind of do it. You close the triangle. So you identify all the components of your idea that have to be resolved. You estimate how much time it takes to discover, create, resolve any one of them, add all that up, and that's how long it's going to take you for your idea to become real. And sometimes it will be past your lifetime, just the way it is, as in the case of Da Vinci. Okay? So yeah, I call that closing the triangle, right? Now, what the hell does that got to do with our Kilimanjaro story and astro-tourism? As I said, everybody thinks of astro-tourism as going someplace and just looking up at the sky. There's more to it. Okay, so if I go back to my, where's my presentation? Was it? Where is it? Here it is here. So let me find it here. I'll find it. So something I was developing while I was at the Department of Science and Technology, and the interesting part was I was hired as an advisor to the observatory on astronomy. So I was hired because I was an astronomer. However, when you talk astronomy in a science ministry, in a ministry of science or department of science, whatever, most of the people who work there will have no idea what the hell you're talking about. And as my boss would always tell me, he would simply say, "Gordon, you're whistling." And I'd be looking at him, "What the hell do you mean whistling?" He was a biologist or a botanist, and he had no idea about astronomy. So in other words, I ended up spending most of my time thinking about economics. And so that's why it seems funny that you have an astronomer telling you about some kind of economics, because I did an MBA and we learned economics, etc., in the MBA program. And on top of which, I ran businesses for a long period of time, so I actually knew what physical economics, especially microeconomics, is all about. And effectively what we realized was, for governments, a project has to maximize these 4 areas: prestige, human capital development, economic activity, and technology transfer. And I call this the PET theory, okay? So P-H-E-T, PET, right? And other people have their own. I got to tell you, there's other ones you can find on the internet. But the point is, from the government's perspective, this is taxpayers' dollars, the project, and this is blue sky science projects. We have to find ways to maximize each of these. It's pretty easy, the prestige being driven by the scientists when they start telling you we're going to build the world's largest radio telescope, SKA, and it's going to produce Nobel Prize, it's going to achieve Nobel Prize days. It might even discover aliens, for crying out loud. So something like that has incredibly high prestige. The entire world will want to use that telescope. It will become so well known. And South Africa will be put on a map. And it has. It has. So what has occurred since they've invested in Meerkat and now the expansion to the first phase of the SKA is the growth of astronomy in South Africa has just taken off. SALT saw a significant increase in the number of astronomers. Meerkat and SKA have put that on steroids. Okay, so now radio astronomy, when I first arrived in South Africa was optical dominant, which means it had more optical, most of its astronomers were optically oriented. A couple were infrared, a few were high energy, a couple of us were radio. There's about 8 of us that did radio astronomy, but the majority did optical astronomy. So they were optical dominant. And now as a result of the SK project, South Africa is now radio dominant. Okay? So the idea of prestige has driven that change in the country. And there's a huge amount of technology being imparted and first off developed as well as transferred to South Africa and in turn into the rest of Africa. So there's this sort of an adoption of new technologies because it requires, radio astronomy is engineering on steroids, okay? So you require students, the education side of it. You require technicians, you require engineers, and then in the end you also require business people. Now, the problem, and you can notice a little mistake, I'm missing my closed brackets, but never mind, don't know what I did there. The problem with most of this idea is astronomers really don't give a damn about any of this. They give some interest in this idea. They certainly get involved in the HCD, but they're most interested in prestige. So the people that drive projects are typically scientists. Okay, so the idea of the government is if they're giving out their money, they want to involve educators, they want to involve engineers, and they want to involve entrepreneurs. And you got to do it early on, and you got to do it forever. So when we talk about astro-tourism, everybody keeps thinking about looking up at the sky, or someone's going to fly in to see your telescope. Now, people may fly to go see the SKA, but it's doubtful. It's just doubtful. If they're driving between Johannesburg and Capetown, yes, they may deviate 2 hours into the Karoo to see the SKA. No doubt about that one. It's entirely possible. Although the area will be shut off, so you're not going to see a hell of a lot. So, there's that, right? Because the problem with cars is they emit radio interference, and the SKA is so sensitive, even something as simple as your car, certainly your cell phone, produces a hell of a lot of interference to a radio telescope. This is a big no-no around telescopes. Okay, and likewise, I'm using a wire. Let me see it here. You can see I've got a wired mouse. I'm used to this because optical mice produce RFI, and at the observatory where I worked, that's a no-no. Okay, let's get this stuff out of the way. Back to the use. So these are the 4 pillars with which I always operate, and these are the things that basically astronomers don't think about. Like I said, they might think of the top 2, and they have engineers doing the 3rd, but they never think about the 4th. Okay, so the 4th pillar, which holds up a project, especially in terms of financing, is the 4th. If you can maximize the 4th, the government will throw money at you. Okay? Philanthropic investments like the Allen Telescope Array. The guy's quite willing to invest, but if you start pissing away that money for all sorts of pie-in-the-sky things that you're feffing around with, what will happen is him being a philanthropist has its limits because he's also a businessman. Okay? And so his business brain is telling him this is a waste of money. And he starts cutting off your funds. Okay? So there's a problem with that. So what you always want to do, and this is a simple MBA program, it's MBA 101, is under promise, over deliver. Okay? So that's the first thing. Say, oh, well, it's like Scotty in Star Trek. Hey, I'm not a miracle worker. I'm not I'm just we don't have enough power. And then he always seems to find extra power. Okay? That's what you want to do. You always want to under promise and over deliver. And the same is true here. And the problem with scientists is we are not economists. We are not businessmen typically. We're not interested in any of that. We're only interested in our craft, which is looking up. Great for astro-tourism because we can show the kids and adults alike who are interested in that sort of thing, but not so good for business. Okay? So we might make a t-shirt, about whatever picture they have, and we could sell that, and that makes us a business person, but it sure as hell doesn't make us a true entrepreneur. So a lot of people are starting to develop, these entrepreneurial things. So for instance, the astro-tourism one, you might take tourists to Salt to see this. So they have these things at Sutherland where they drive people out to the telescope, they show it to them, they give them night sky viewing at the other place, and then they take them back to their nice fancy B&Bs and everybody's happy. They drive back to Capetown the next day. They have a great story to tell somebody. But most importantly, it was the entire experience they were selling. It wasn't the astronomy alone. Okay? And again, we're going to have to keep doing that. But what people don't understand is a telescope is more than simply looking up. Okay? So the technology is a hint to where really the economic activity lies. And a lot of the engineers will tell you these things because with SKA, Meerkat, there are already lots of technology companies springing up because they're producing parts and products for the Meerkat telescopes, such as their receivers or something like that. So that becomes part of the economic activity outside of actually the project itself. Okay, if I can design receivers, I can sell them to the project, yes, but I can also sell them to other projects. Okay, so you're growing a business which employs technicians and engineers, and that generates an income for the local economy. That's economic activity I'm talking about. The other one would be restaurants, hotels, things like this. Okay, so now you got the idea. So now I've gone into fantastic detail. So what was the crazy idea that I talked about for the Kilimanjaro astronomy project? Okay, what was the crazy idea? And I'm going to just show it to you here. Here we go. Okay, so here it is. So I was struggling. As I said to you, I did not want to build this road. Go back to this again. I'm jumping around a little too much here, but that's okay. You know, you'll get the idea. Where was that road picture? It's around here somewhere. Nope, 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 nope. So, no, that's not it. What the hell am I doing? No, whatever. The hell with it. You got the idea. The road, that the switchbacks, all that, I didn't want to build that because it looked disgusting, okay? And if I was having to build this road, I would have had to build a lot of it. Once you get to the plateau, it's pretty flat, pretty straightforward. Not a train smash, it would have been fine, and it would have just followed the trails that already existed. So in that sense, it was not a train smash. But the real answer is, I needed to find a way to go under, around, over. Where the hell did that go? I had pictures of that. Let me see if I can find it. It was in one of my presentations I had open here. Oh, okay, here's okay. I'll come back to those guys in a second, just a matter of interest. So here is the three issues I had to resolve, right? Okay, economic, ecological, aesthetical, right? Now, and basically, you know, this is what you want to do. You want to get foreign direct investment. You want to add value and everything else. And anyways, but the big problem is, of course, the big problem is you got to get up the mountain. And the road itself was quite deadly. It was quite harsh. So that was a problem. And this is again not what I want to show you. Where the freaking hell was it? I don't know. This drives me nuts. I'm really disorganized. I'm just jumping around on us here. That's okay though. Don't worry about it. So the point was that we wanted to get over the rainforest. And that's really what I want to say to you. We wanted to get over the rainforest, and of course, a very simple way to get over the rainforest without cutting trees and without building an ugly road, although the road had value, we thought of the idea of a cable car. And so, of course, cable cars, once you start thinking cable car, your entire world changes in a project like this. And in effect, you're saying that we're rebranding Kilimanjaro as a leisure mountain because once I have a cable car like this, I can pressurize, I can bring people up to 5,000 meters, they can get a better view of the Kibo Hut and the peak. They don't have to climb to it, there is no exertion, they go to a pressurized observatory with restaurant, etc., etc., etc. The more amenities I offer at the 5,000 mark, the more money I generate because I keep people up there longer, okay? And so it becomes a complete rebranding of Kilimanjaro just to build this cable car system. And so I literally went into a meeting with the government of Tanzania and I said, look, this may sound crazy, my crazy idea. I said, this may sound crazy, but I'm proposing we build $1 billion hotel / cable car complex in order to build a 10 or 20 or $30 million telescope. And everybody looked at me in shock. And then I had to explain to them. And then I went through this presentation, and this is what I started showing them. And I said that if we do something like this, and we do it in a grand style, in grand size, and we go big, we don't think small, we think big, you're going to attract something of the order of 1 million people a year to go up Kilimanjaro. So instead of 35,000 people a year who are staying in bed and breakfasts and one-star hotels at best, paying $50 a night, you now have 1 million staying in 5-star hotels paying $150 to $200 a night. Okay? Now they're only staying for 2 or 3 nights, but they're spending $150 a night, plus they're going to restaurants, plus they're going up your cable car, and you're creating thousands upon thousands of new jobs. And all of the technology existed. So for me to close my triangle on this one, it existed. The companies that build these cable cars exist. They built these things up to, 4,000 plus, around 4,000 meters. All of it's possible, right? So I was doing nothing unique or odd or different. All right? Nothing. So basically this was my my crazy idea in 2016. Now, what happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. Once people see that there's money opportunities, and regrettably this is what occurred, there are others that say, hey, I think I can make money from this. And then they decide, hey, we're building the cable car. And then they don't want you involved for fear that you will take some control of it, and therefore they make no money, so they want to go away with it. And I got to tell you something. When I first came up with this idea, I told my buddies, I said, listen, do not think of this as a moneymaker. Cable cars don't make money. Okay, if you own the cable car system and it's private and you're allowed to operate it as a private business, sure, you can make money. But the government, this is through a national park, the government will eventually nickel and dime you, and you'll have no profit. So this was always going to be handed over to the parks people. The same people that said they're building the cable car already. So we were already planning to give it to them. And yet they just didn't want to take the chance. It's a zero-sum game for them. It's binary. They're worried that they'd be on the out. So this was a great idea. Surprised the living hell. I mean, people were shaking my hands afterwards. It was an amazing experience. You're standing there in Tanzania. It's hot. People are cheering and clapping, and they're coming up and shaking your hands like you saved someone's life or something. It wasn't, and it was that, it was in the newspapers and stuff like this. I was like, wow, this is crazy. I'm just talking astronomy here, So, anyways, this was my crazy idea. But the problem was the cable car project part was taken away from me. So now I'm left with I've got to go back to the road story. And again, as I told you, roads are ugly. So I don't really like roads. So I went away from that, and let's see if I can find it. Okay, let's see if I can do this. What do I got going here? Okay, so here. So I'm not going to play any video. Do I have a video? I thought I had a video. I thought I had a video of it. And hell with it. Anyways, so the end of it all, I decided to hell with that. Let's go with an airship. Now, people look at me, airship, what the hell are you going on about, Gordon? The problem is the technology doesn't yet exist, but it's being developed now. So when I presented this idea in 2022, the last time I climbed Kilimanjaro, they had already started building the prototypes for heavy lift airships that can lift 100 tons and convey it across continents at above 3,500 meters. So it's entirely possible for one of them to go to 4,500 around 4,500 meters with 15 tons. So they could deliver and lower down to site without me having to build a road. And again, another crazy idea. And again, the triangle, to close it, I still have a few years to go. Because the first product to get in the air, let's just see if we can find this. We'll get out of there. Let's go here. Let's go airships. Okay, let's just go airships. Okay, right? And we'll talk about the most recent ones. Let's see. I don't want to burn. Let's go here. Let's go to images. There's a whole bunch of them. You got flying whales, and what's the company? Not Airlander. Here's an example. And I met all these sorts of people. I met lots of them. Where are they? And there's tons of things that they want to talk about this anyways. So for example, here's flying whales, and there they are loading and unloading cargo ships, cargoes. What are they called? Containers. Jesus, my lips are not working. And so they haven't built their ship yet. They've started building their factory, but they haven't built their ship. An American company, can't remember which one it is now. I got to find it. This is the hard part, is to find the damn things. They are already doing their testing. Let's go airship testing. Let's see if I can find them. And largest air ready to fly. Is that the one? Flight testing. Is this the ticket? So basically, you could see lots of these ships are now being built. So they're building their test cases, okay? And so they're already building a model that's going to be able to lift, I think it's the first one they're building, I think is a 30-ton prototype. And they're doing flight testing as we speak. So the technology is getting closer and closer to closing the triangle. So it's entirely possible that airships will be used to lift telescopes onto interesting sites where otherwise you might have had to build a very expensive road and not be able to do it. And then you could service it with an airship as well, for that matter, okay? Or climb up there, or what have you, okay? So now this is a crazy idea, but I got to tell you, it's a really cool idea. And why do I say that? Because think of the marketing opportunities for these airships. If they were to lift the telescope and put it in situ on an iconic mountain like Kilimanjaro, like I don't care where, you go wherever, you choose your poison. And to do this, and they would make a documentary of it, it would become the basis of most of their ads because it would demonstrate proof of concept in a very grandiose way. So again, back to what I said to you, we think of astro-tourism as just looking up. Astro-tourism is part of the economic activity around a project. This is economic activity. This is what you want to be talking about. This is where we want to be. We want to be going on about, really cool ideas. Now, of course, most astronomers, they will look at this and go, Gordon, that's too complicated. Let's just build a road and we'll get on with it. But they'll pay lip service to the government about the environmental impact and stuff like that. And I'm not saying don't build a road, because you can build the road. You can expand the road as is in situ in Kilimanjaro in particular. You can do that, and you're not going to have a large environmental impact, relatively speaking, okay? But it's going to take some effort. It's going to be expensive. It's 40, 50 kilometers of road you have to build, and whatever that costs. Once upon a time, it was $100,000 a kilometer, but I'm sure that number is well past that now, and especially if you're building at high altitude, it will go up astronomically, pardon the pun. So, it'll make projects expensive, but doable, because you don't have to build you don't have to build a road that's perfect. You just got to build a road that can get your equipment up there, right? That's the key. So, and then use it for, going up and down with the engineering staff and stuff like that are looking at the telescope, maintenance, etc. Okay, so crazy ideas, they may seem crazy now, but maybe one day they won't be. Maybe one day we'll have a telescope that's actually in this ship, and we can park it up anywhere we want in the world, and then we'll pick it up at a later date and move it to other sites. We use them as temporary observatories, okay? Or we literally observe from the telescope itself, because we can use radome material, and the radio rays will go through the material, and we can observe from inside the telescope. So it's a question of making the telescope lighter. So these are crazy ideas, but these are ideas that are possible, okay? And so that's my story. So when I keep talking about, astro-tourism and stuff like that, so many of us, we forget that we just think of it in terms of, looking up at the night sky. It could be something as simple as selling a child a telescope, okay? It just is. Now, another form of astro-tourism that I was involved in, and I said this yesterday in the presentation I did yesterday, the live stream I did yesterday. This is the four of us. This man here, this is Jeff Hoffman. He's the astronaut that was one of the people involved in fixing the Hubble telescope, okay? So he did some of the spacewalks. This is my buddy Magruder, Charles. He's emeritus at Western Kentucky University, and this guy was the head. He's now retired. It's Williams. God, sorry, man, I can't remember your first name, but he was the head of the Space Telescope Institute in Baltimore. Okay, but Jeff was a great guy. And you can see how tall he is, okay? So he was only able to become an astronaut because of the shuttlecraft program. Because if he had been a part of the Apollo days, he's too tall. I would have been better. Look, I even had a little bit of hair back then. Can you believe it? Anyways, yeah, Jeff was a great guy. Just a great guy. And I had the pleasure of ferrying these three guys around South Africa, giving a series of presentations at various universities. And I had a lot of fun. And I was always on the phone with media people. They were threatening to call the minister and have me fired because I didn't do this, I didn't do that. And then they'd call me back and thank me profusely because I was able to, secure an interview with Jeff. Oh, it was funny. It was priceless. It really was. But that's a form of astro-tourism. So you know, like you're giving something to the community. The community loved it. People came in hundreds. So I think we got in 7 presentations across in 4 cities or something like that, or 6 presentations in 5 cities or whatever it was. But there was more presentations than cities. But we went a bunch of institutes, and we had lots of people. We had hundreds come and listen to Jeff talk primarily. Okay, I got to talk. Charles talked. Charles is married to a Namibian woman, and he used to work in Nigeria. He has a lot of experience in African astronomy, and he's a very big supporter of African astronomy, being a part of the National Society of Black Physicists. And again, I can't think of his first name. Damn it. Anyway, come to me. It'll come to me again. But anyways, this man also talked. He talked about the Hubble and stuff like that. And of course, Jeff actually fixed it. And he was an astronomer too, so he talked about his astronomy as well. And as he taught me when we were traveling around, he said, Gordon, you had to always think of this being an astronaut as plan B. So his plan A was to become an astronomer. His plan B was to be an astronaut. Yeah, so that's a form of astro-tourism right there, okay? But all the same, building a road and taking power up Kilimanjaro and offering power to the huts at Kibo, and all the various stations along the route, that's a form of astro-tourism, because you're adding economic value to the mountain, which will lead to greater amounts of tourism. And as long as we don't hurt the climbing experience, all of those jobs will still exist, plus extra jobs catering to the observatory. So one has to be very careful to get this balance right. Otherwise, you will hurt it. Now, personally, you're not going to allow people to drive up this road. It's going to be strictly prohibited and controlled. So, in the reality is, the tourists, the adventure tourists, will still walk. The astronomer maintenance people will drive up and stuff like that, and be in pressurized vehicles and do their work and go away. But everybody else, nothing else will change, except they will have a better source of power and Wi-Fi, et cetera, up there. That'd be the plus. So building a road has a real value. I'm not taking anything away from the concept. I really am not. It's just that I just like cool ideas. And let me. Where's that picture? Okay, I want to show you. Not this. This is it. This is stupid airships. I want to show. Where's that picture I had of these 4 characters? Where the hell? Oh, here it is. Okay, it's in my presentation. I want to show you these 4 guys. And when I talk about, think cool, it's a concept. It's beyond simply looking stylish. When Nikola Tesla started coming up with his ideas about AC and versus fighting against, and he worked with Westinghouse. Westinghouse stole his patents, by the way. Told him, oh no, I buy them from you, but I'll still give you. And he got robbed. The man died penniless. It was terrible. Howard Hughes. Think about it. Howard Hughes came from a company that owned a milling shop that made tool and die makers. So they had a factory that made tools, basically, okay? And parts for the oil industry in Texas and stuff like that. And he wanted to go into making airplanes, and then making movies, and then making satellites. The guy was he was well ahead of his time. Likewise, Steve Jobs in the computer industry. And then, of course, the modern day equivalent would be Elon Musk. Okay? So we have these people that really think cool. And maybe they're awkward people to talk to. Maybe they were, I don't know. I have no idea. I've never talked to any one of them, obviously. 3 of them are dead. But the point is that maybe they weren't that easy to talk to and stuff like that. But just imagine the ideas they must have had. Like Steve Jobs, most of his patents was in packaging, not in computing. Okay? So yes, they had this GUI interface and stuff like that, just as Apple did and all that. And they made a better looking computer in the end. And it really was selling to the kids in that, especially the university types and the artistic people. But the reality is how he packaged things is where he got his patents. So it's quite interesting to think like that. Elon Musk started off in PayPal, okay? They wrote software for PayPal. They sold it for a bundle. They started buying into Tesla. And then he created SpaceX and the Boring Company, and, right? So, yeah, it was all sorts of cool things. So I always tell people to think cool. And cool ideas sometimes are crazy ideas, but it doesn't mean they're not solvable. It doesn't mean they can't be realized. And so never limit yourself to what is presently available. And so often we do that because we're so fixated on just doing astronomy. Okay? We're so fixated on that. And it's, I don't know. Yeah, you can hear it in my voice. I'm not a big fan of that kind of stuff, right? What the hell have I got here? Yeah, anyways, I think I've shown all these things. What's this one? Yeah, so, I mean, here's an example. So, once you've climbed up Kilimanjaro on your way down, here's the guys, these are the guys that all went up with us. And they're singing, and they're giving us a big send-off. It's a real experience. It really is. It's one of the most positive sights on the plate again. Me, no, I don't like singing and dancing. So, not my thing. But, it was an experience. And, you're so relieved, you're back down, you're so happy. Everybody around you is happy for you. This character right here, not Cabriti, Emmanuel. Regrettably, he died a week later. So whether it was the result of him climbing the mountain with us or not, I'm not sure. But maybe it put a strain on his heart or something like that. But the poor man died a week later, and he was a tragic loss to Tanzanian astronomy. So he himself wasn't an astronomer, but he was a very strong supporter of this project. And he was very gifted in political activities, etc., in the Tanzanian community. And it was a big loss. It's a really big loss. It's a big hole to fill. And quite frankly, we haven't filled it yet. So, I mean, just a great man. He really was. I really enjoyed chatting to him all the time, and he really liked me. So, so I feel really close to him. Him and Jiwaji are really good friends of mine, and regrettably, he's no longer with us. Just to say that, to put that in there. But so if I go back to like this idea of telescope stories, it wasn't a crazy idea. It was just an idea that required coming up with the technological components, solving them, and then putting them in place. So it's doable. The airship is another, right? The technology will be available in the coming couple years that will be able to lift telescopes onto relatively high mountains, not very high mountains, but relatively high, because there are limits to an airship story, okay? Because the higher you go, the less you can lift. You can't use helicopters. And as I said, this is just to recap basically a lot of stuff. Again, always think in terms of leisure versus adventure. And quite frankly, astro-tourism is a mixture of these two. Okay? Because you're going to go to exotic places and they may not be comfortable when you get there. So it won't be, if you're seeing an eclipse over a tourist resort, it's heaven. Okay? But 9 times out of 10, that ain't the case. Right? And this is the idea. So really it's about economic activity. So astro-tourism fits into this category of these 4 pillars. And we really want to find a way to optimize this. And it's something astronomers don't think about, but I do. Okay? I do. And I will continue to think about this all the time. And what I try to look for is cool ideas. Because what do cool ideas do? Cool ideas make a project more interesting. The more interesting the project is, the more attention it gets, the greater the economic return you get for that. Okay? So cool equals economic return. So if you're building your telescope, make it look cool. Find a way to make it look like something an artist would have created. You know what I mean? Like you want to make it look beautiful. And a lot of times, we go for functionality because we're worried about cost. We don't want to spend money. But sometimes that extra few $1,000,000 is the difference between having lots of money tossed at you by the government versus getting nothing. When a government official shows up and they're getting photographs in front of your facility, your telescope, or whatever thing you're doing, your project, you want them to be excited to be there, and you want the photographs to be so cool they're on the front page of the newspaper the next day. And that's why NASA produces so many photos coming out of Hubble and James Webb, because the more pictures that come out and get onto the front page, the more tax dollars they can generate for themselves into NASA. Okay? So it attracts money. People want to pay. Okay, so that's all part of economic activity around the project. It's not directly related to the project. The project does not need to have photo ops. The project is the project. It's doing science. But for us to have economic activity, we have to find ways to get sound bites and snapshots. And we have to do it all the time. It cannot be the day we cut the ribbon for operations and then we never see politicians ever again. We never talk to the press ever again. We have to be in their ear all the time, feeding them with pictures. So even if your telescope doesn't produce pretty pictures, find a way to get in the news all the time. Okay? And then find a way to create economic activity around your project. So if you can do something cool like have a nearby science exhibit that's related to your observatory, and then you could put, I don't know, build rides like we talked about this for Heart of Biztalk, in fact, where I worked at my favorite observatory I talked about yesterday. We wanted to talk about building a, what do they call those things? A monorail that you could ride down into the observatory. Now, we would strictly control cell phones and stuff like that, and we would ride you back up, but we would create a tourist attraction at the top of the mountain, up the valley, out of the way of the line of sight to the telescope so that we don't have RFI, but then we can attract people and give them an economic return. Okay? So that's an example that you can look at and do possibly at your observatories. Okay? Like Mauna Kea, wow, like they have a lot of problems there because of the cultural issues and stuff like that. And they're going to find solutions, and for many years the economics was far more important than the cultural, and that's the problem. That should have all been considered at the same time. And the people I've been talking with that are looking at telescopes on Kilimanjaro or a telescope on Kilimanjaro, they're very concerned about that, and rightly so. And I wish them all the best. I mean, I understand that Tanzania is strongly focused on the economics, not the cultural, but irrespective, it's equally important. Okay? So you have to think of those things, and it has to be involved when you do your environmental assessment. There has to be a cultural assessment as well. And then more importantly, you have to actively involve the local communities, because that ensures we maximize that. So if we can encourage and expand the cultural experience, let's do that too. Okay? Let's do that too. Why not? Right? So if we can give them access to their sacred sites while we're using sites that's away from theirs and not hurting their sites, that's a double plus, So, that's all part of astro-tourism. So please, people, when you talk about astro-tourism, don't stop just talking about looking up. Stop that. Go beyond, look deeper, find more, and then don't stop talking about it. Okay? And therein lies the real issue we have, is too often, as I said, we just fixate on this part, the science of it, and maybe the education, because we want students feeding into the science, right? So this is us being selfish. Scientists are being selfish when they do HCD because they want, it's a mill. Projects are mills. You get a turnstile of students coming through, and they really are cheap labor. They're doing their MSCs, PhDs, and they're using the facilities in some way, shape, or form. They're the next generation. But quite honestly, we're producing so many PhDs now. Where are they going to work? What are they going to do? And we have to start thinking beyond that. And maybe the answer is start directing them from here into the economic activities aspect. So perhaps while people are doing PhDs in astronomy, we should be trying to get them to do MBAs, or to take a business degree or a communications degree. So then they can get other jobs, so that they've got skill sets that are immediately transferable to other jobs, which also help our project. So instead of seeing human capital development only as part of the science or the engineering, see it also as the business side as well. Okay? So all of this, people don't think about this. And I've been saying this for a long time, but I'm a small person. Nobody listens to me. And I wasn't well liked for a long time, especially when I worked at the Department of Science and Technology, because I was working for the government, and a lot of the astronomers were very suspicious of the government. I'm suspicious of government. I don't blame them. But so then they try to keep a distance from you. And so then you're not able to really do your job very well. You can't just walk amongst them and talk to them and talk to the engineers and that. And so I've actually removed myself from that part, and I get to be sort of a consultant on projects, and I get to walk amongst the engineers, the educators, the scientists, and the business people, and even the government people. And they sit right here over and above the project, by the way. So they're the pinnacle of the project, the government, because that's the taxpayer. That's your boss, the taxpayer, okay? So, yeah. So, when we start talking about exotic projects on iconic mountains like Kilimanjaro, one has to be very careful of the economic activity, that you may hurt something else. And you got to make damn certain that the crossover, jobs lost versus jobs created, the people that lost jobs will find jobs in the new jobs. Do you see what I'm getting at? So when I shut down the logging industry in Canada, I say, they'll just go and code, or they'll become tour operators. Have you ever met a logger? Have you ever gone to an oil rig? Have you ever met an oil rigger? Have you ever met a person that cuts a tree down? Have you ever talked to a construction worker? My point is that chances are the vast majority of them will never get jobs in tourism because they're not built for it. That's why they went into logging. They preferred being in the bush, away from people. They're rough and ready. They want to get their hands dirty. So when you start talking about, we'll let them code. No, don't talk like that. Understand, as economies, as industries disappear, like as we move away from the fossil fuels industries to other industries, we have to ask ourselves, where are the technologies going to be, and what is the translation of skills we presently have to the future going to be like? Don't simply discount those people, because they're going to be 80 years old one day or 70 years old. We got to take care of them. So you want them to keep making money so they can take care of themselves. So, and I'm rambling on here. It's been over an hour. It's almost an hour and a half, and I besides, I'm getting close to my bedtime. So I'm going to cut this short. So when I talk about astro-tourism, I'm not referring to simply looking up. Okay? Just so you know, I am not that person that just looks up. I am not that person. Right? So, as I said to you, I see stuff like this and I think, wonderful, great, good job, a nice entrepreneurial business, and I can see handfuls of people that are doing it. When an eclipse occurs, you get thousands of people. There's eclipse across eastern USA and Canada, and there was millions of people that got to see it, but it's because they lived there. Okay? So, but I could sell them sunglasses, the glasses to actually stare at the eclipse with. There's a form of astro-tourism. I sold them something. I could have star parties, and I'm selling them t-shirts and giving them other things to go along with seeing the eclipse. That's a form of astro-tourism. But so too is the economic activity around a telescope. Because in the end, it's got nothing to do with the astronomy. It's got everything to do with the fact that there's an observatory there. So what is that? It's the business that goes into operating the telescope. In other words, the administration, things like that, plus and so on and go on. I could go on ad nauseum, and I could spend hours talking about this. And I'm going to stop, but I'm going to talk about one more thing. And it's something I saw, and this was back in 2010 when I was at the Department of Science and Technology. I sat in a presentation by somebody from the IAU, and they were making the claim that if you develop an astronomy program, you'll become a developed country. In other words, they were saying that if you look at all the developed countries, they have astronomy. And they were trying to claim that there's a correlation between economic prosperity and astronomy. And the problem with that is causation. Correlation is not causation. Okay, it's simple as that. Correlation is not causation. And it was to me, and I remember approaching the guy. I didn't cut him off. I didn't embarrass him in front of these people because he had a job to do. And he's a good friend of mine. But I went up to him afterwards. I said, hey, and I'm not going to give his name because I don't like giving names. I said, hey, that's actually wrong. That's actually wrong. The reason developed countries have astronomy is because they have a great deal of wealth that they can invest in blue sky science and not worry about it, because they don't mind investing in something that may give them a return in the future. Okay? like NASA is a great example. You know, for every dollar in, $7 out because of the new technologies that came out of it. So when you invest in big tech, you tend to get returns from new technologies, right? Well, astronomy is no different than that. However, you know, it's not equally true. If I build an observatory in a desperately poor area, the people in the area are not going to benefit from the telescope, except the road you build to get to it. Because if you build a road to an observatory out in a desert, the people that live in that desert can use the road to go to villages, which means it's going to save them time and energy. Okay? So there's another example of astro-tourism. When you're thinking of building a telescope like the SKA and the Karoo, you know, instead of building a airstrip at the site so you don't have to go to the local airport and then drive on a gravel road, how about just tar the road through the farming community and upgrade the airport of the community itself so that the community benefits from it? Those things drove me crazy. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that because I'm going to start getting political, and I don't want to, because I like astronomy and I like telescopes to be built. You know, I just do. I actually love them. You know, I love working at them. I wish I could be working at one right now. If anybody's got a job for me out there, I'll come and work for you. Pay me as a postdoc. I don't care. I like being at observatories. I just do. So, let me leave it at that. I want to thank you for joining me for this conversation. You know, I hope you got something out of it. If there's anything you can take away, just remember that there's more to astro-tourism than simply looking up. So, you know, you go and enjoy yourselves, but do look up. So, good night.